Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Abigail in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Abigail. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you, I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you'll get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film. And I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film, storyline, star cast, actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. So let's start the video. Abigail is a 2024 American vampire horror comedy film directed by Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett and written by Stephen Shields and Guy Busick. It stars Alicia Weir as the title character alongside Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, Kathryn Newton, Will Catlett, Kevin Durand, Angus Cloud, and Giancarlo Esposito. The film follows a group of kidnappers who capture the daughter of a powerful underworld figure and demand $50 million for her release, unaware of something sinister. Originally an adaptation of Dracula's Daughter, 1936, the film was announced to be in development in April 2023, with Bettinelli-Olpin and Gillett attached as directors, and Shields and Busick hired to write the screenplay. It was also announced that the film would be a co-production between Bettinelli-Olpin, Gillett, and Chad Villela's Radio Silence Productions, James Vanderbilt, Paul Neinstein, and William Sherak's Project X Entertainment, and Trip Vinson's Vinson Films. Abigail had its world premiere at the Overlook Film Festival on April 7, 2024, and was theatrically released in the United States by Universal Pictures on April 19th. The film received generally positive reviews from critics and grossed $42.4 million on a $28 million production budget. Plot: young ballet dancer Abigail is abducted by 6 criminals and taken to the secluded Wilhelm Manor. Before leaving, their leader Lambert instructs them to guard Abigail for 24 hours, at which point they will receive an equal share of a $50 million ransom paid by her father. The group, using aliases to avoid identifying each other, consists of former Army medic and recovering drug addict Joey, former NYPD detective Frank, thrill-seeking hacker Sammy, former Marine sniper Rickles, dim-witted mob enforcer Peter, and sociopathic driver Dean. Though reluctant to continue with the plan as she was unaware Abigail was a child, Joey is tasked with managing Abigail. Joey is sympathetic to her, sharing that she has a son and promising to protect Abigail from harm. Abigail admits her father does not care about her and will not pay the ransom before apologizing for what is going to happen to Joey. Perturbed by Abigail's words, Frank violently confronts her, learning that her father is Christophe Lazar, a powerful, almost mythical crime lord. Dean enters the basement where he is attacked by an unseen assailant. Investigating his screams, Sammy finds Dean's decapitated corpse. The group realize that Lazar's legendarily violent enforcer, Valdez, is inside the house while the security system prevents them from leaving. Searching for a way out, Rickles is mutilated and killed. The group confronts Abigail for information, but she transforms into a vampire, revealing she is Valdez. Frank shoots Abigail, but her injuries heal almost instantly. Frank, Sammy, and Peter attack Abigail with garlic, crucifixes, and other folkloric weapons said to ward off vampires to no effect. Her strength and speed allow her to easily overwhelm and prevent them from stabbing her through the heart. Abigail bites Sammy before being incapacitated by Joey with a tranquilizer and locked in a cage. Upon awakening, the centuries-old Abigail reveals that she knows the group's true identities and arranged for them to abduct her through Lambert so she can kill them for wronging Lazar. Joey deduces that Abigail has killed dozens of her father's enemies in a failed effort to earn his love. Abigail effortlessly escapes her confines and attacks Frank, but Joey exposes Abigail to sunlight, which severely wounds her. With hours before sunset, the group splits up to find an escape route, but Sammy transforms into Abigail's vampire thrall and kills Peter. Abigail has Sammy attack Frank and Joey, forcing Joey to destroy Sammy with reflected sunlight. Lambert lures Frank and Joey to a hidden security room where he reveals Abigail turned him into a vampire years earlier for helping Frank avoid Lazar's wrath. Frank allows Lambert to turn him into a vampire so they can kill Abigail and Lazar, but following his transformation, Frank kills Lambert for leading him into Abigail's trap. Abigail attacks Frank, but he overpowers her and drains her blood, leaving her weakened. Cornered, Joey leaves a phone message for her son, apologizing for having been absent from his life for many years. Reveling in his power, Frank bites Joey, intending to turn her into his thrall and force her to kill Abigail and eventually her son. However, Joey does not transform because of Frank's inexperience with his new abilities, and she and Abigail team up to kill him. Abigail encourages Joey to leave and be present in her son's life, but Lazar arrives and threatens Joey. Abigail defends Joey for being present when she needed her while Lazar was not. Although Lazar angrily rebukes her, he relents for Abigail's sake and allows the bloodied and battered Joey to leave. Cast: Melissa Barrera as Joey, a military medic and recovering addict. Dan Stevens as Frank, a corrupt former police detective. Alicia Weir as Abigail, a centuries-old vampire who has the appearance of a 12-year-old girl. Will Catlett as Rickles, a Marine sniper who lives by his own moral code. Kathryn Newton as Sammy, a thrill-seeking hacker from a wealthy upbringing. Kevin Durand as Peter, a physically imposing former muscle for the Broussard family of Montreal struggling with his conscience. Angus Cloud as Dean, a talented and sociopathic getaway driver. Giancarlo Esposito as Lambert, a criminal mastermind connected to Abigail's kidnapping. Matthew Good as Father Christoph Lazar, an ancient vampire, infamous crime lord, and Abigail's father. Production. Development. In April 2023, it was reported that Radio Silence Productions was developing a monster thriller film for Universal Pictures, with Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett attached to direct, with Chad Villella serving as producer alongside William Sherak, Paul Neinstein, and James Vanderbilt at Project X Entertainment, while Stephen Shields and Guy Busick would write the screenplay. The project was stated to be a modern-day adaptation of one of the Universal Classic Monsters characters, similar in approach to The Invisible Man, 2020, or Renfield, 2023, with the synopsis being described as a unique take on legendary monster lore and will represent a fresh, new direction for how to celebrate classic characters. Originally intended to be Bettinelli-Olpin and Gillett's next project following the release of the fifth Scream installment, the duo delayed its realization until after Scream 6. The project was originally titled Dracula's Daughter, the same name as the 1936 film upon which it is based, with Universal restating that while they had considered a singular continuity with The Mummy, 2017, each release will continue to be rooted in the horror genre, with no restrictions on budget, rating, or genre. They are not part of a shared, interconnected universe, which allows each film to stand on its own. This new direction is filmmaker-driven, inviting innovative filmmakers with original, bold ideas for these characters to develop the stories and pitch them. The film was officially titled Abigail in January 2024. As an Easter egg to previous Radio Silence films, a portrait of a distant ancestor of Ready or Not character Tony Ladomas is displayed in the mansion. Bettinelli-Olpin and Gillett said they wanted to avoid mentioning Dracula as a way to set apart their work from other vampire movies. At one point, they considered having Abigail's father reveal he killed Dracula, but this line did not make it into the film. Casting. In April 2023, Melissa Barrera was cast for one of the main roles of the film after previously appearing in the filmmaking duo Scream films. The following month, Dan Stevens, Kevin Neinstein. In June 2023, it was announced that Giancarlo Esposito was cast in a supporting role. Weir, known for her role as Matilda Wormwood in the 2022 Netflix musical film, was said to be playing Dracula's daughter, although this connection is never made in the film. Filming. Principal photography began May 15, 2023 in Dublin, Ireland, with the setting intending to stand in for Boston. though the city location is not made specific in the final film, aside from one character pointing out someone moved up here from Queens. The opening dance performance was filmed at Bordgeist Energy Theatre in Dublin. Most of the filming took place at Glenmaroon House, aka the Guinness Manor, which is the ancestral home of the prominent Guinness family, in Lugala near the Wicklow Mountains and on the edge of Dublin's Phoenix Park. Filming was suspended July 14th due to the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike. After the strike ended, filming resumed November 23rd and wrapped December 14th. Aaron Morton served as the cinematographer. Cloud finished filming his scenes prior to his death on July 31st, 2023. Weir learned ballet for her role, incorporating it into her character's movements, and performed her own stunts. Filming wrapped on December 14th of the same year. Music. Brian Tyler composed the film's score. He collaborated with Bettinelli-Olpin and Gillett on prior projects. The directors commissioned Gene Dawson for an original song, Burn My Tongue, which plays over the closing credits. The soundtrack album, featuring Tyler's score and Burn My Tongue, was released on April 19th. Release. Abigail had its world premiere at the Overlook Film Festival on April 7, 2024, and was released by Universal Pictures in the United States on April 19, 2024. The film was released on premium video on demand by Universal Pictures Home Entertainment on May 7, 2024. The film was released on DVD and Blu-ray on July 9, 2024. The release includes 4 making-of documentaries, a feature-length audio commentary with Matt Bettinelli-Olpin, Tyler Gillett, and editor Michael Shawver, as well as deleted scenes and a gag reel. Reception. Box office. Abigail grossed $25.9 million in the United States and Canada and $16.2 million in other territories, currently has made a total of $42.4 million. In the United States and Canada, Abigail was released alongside the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare and Spy's Family Code, White, and was projected to gross $12 to $15 million from 3,384 theaters in its opening weekend. The film made $4 million on its first day, including $1 million from Thursday night previews. It went on to debut to $10.2 million, finishing second at the box office behind holdover Civil War. The film then made $5.2 million, a drop of 49.5%, and $2.3 million in its second and third weekends, respectively, finishing in fifth and then ninth. Critical response. On the review aggregator website, Rotten Tomatoes, 83% of 220 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 6.8 per 10. The website's consensus reads, carrying off well-worn vampire tropes with a balletic flourish, Abigail dances around the familiarity of its premise with a game cast and slick style. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 62 out of 100, based on 38 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an A+ to F scale. B.J. Colangelo wrote in Slashfilm that, with a pitch-perfect ensemble cast, exquisitely timed laugh-out-loud moments of humor, a barrage of twists, or should I say pirouettes, an unbelievable amount of blood, killer action set pieces, and a downright transcendent performance by one of the best child actors in the game, Abigail sets the bar as the most fun you can have with a horror movie of the year. In other words, Abigail is horror on point. Traditionally, films that are this delightfully raucous, bloody, and I mean bloody and silly, are relegated to B-movie schlock. Not a bad thing, for the record. But Abigail still embraces the excessive and ornate gothic aesthetics of classic horror movies. The result is an old-school vampire movie with modern frisk and flair, and an absolute blast of a movie to watch with a crowd. I'm sure there will be plenty who think I'm overhyping the film or exaggerating how good it is, but I honestly wouldn't change a thing. Abigail is a perfect horror movie and already one of the best films of 2024, I pinky promise. Manohla Dargis wrote in the New York Times that Abigail has been described as a take on Dracula's Daughter, 1936, one of the horror films in Universal's vault, some of which it has resurrected in some fashion. The press notes for Abigail name-check a few vampire titles, but Daughter isn't among them, and for good reason, because there's little to link these two. That's too bad. The earlier film is a true curiosity. It stars Gloria Holden as a countess who preys on men and women alike and begs a doctor to help her with her ghastly condition. With its lesbian overtones, the movie is a vexed and tasty text. Censors urged the studio to avoid suggestions of perverse sexual desire, and the Countess a complex villain in a film that is very much worth a look. David Fear of Rolling Stone wrote, "It's a gas, watching this ensemble bouncing off each other when the shit goes down and navigating the obstacle course that Bettinelli-Olpin and Gillett have set for them in the film's chaotic, mondo, bloody back half." We weren't joking about that whole exploding body thing. Stevens has previously shown a knack for playing complicated douchebags, and that talent becomes refined here. Weir, who's a bit of a find in terms of playing a centuries-old fiend in the body of a tween, puts a sickly sharp spin on a lot of her juicier lines. Cloud, R.I.P., and Duran finds different ways of showcasing the dim-wittery of their characters. Newton once again reminds you that she's a first-rate pickpocket when it comes to stealing scenes, and Barrera steps into the role as steely scream queen extraordinaire in a way that makes you hope she really does have a long career in front of her instead of an aborted one already behind her. The film has been included on many Best of 2024 lists, including Variety's The Best Horror Movies of 2024, Screen Rant's 10 Best Horror Movies of 2024, Bloody Disgusting's The 10 Best Horror Movies Released in the First Half of 2024, Time Out's The Best Horror Movies of 2024, and Slash Films' The 19 Best Horror Movies of 2024 so far. On July 8, 2024, the film was nominated for 5 Fangoria Chainsaw Awards, including 3 for Best Supporting Performance, Best Makeup FX, and Best Wide Release Movie. Home media. After marketing for the film was commonly blamed for its lackluster box office, leading to headlines such as "Abigail's marketing team made a huge mistake," the film finally found success on home media platforms as one of the most popular titles online, and has been #1 on Peacock since its release, where it has become a hit on streaming. Accolades. The trailer for Abigail tells you almost everything you need to know about the movie. A wacky high-concept horror thriller about a group of kidnappers who bite off more than they can chew when they unwittingly abduct a child-sized vampire ballerina. The vamp, played with some relish by Alicia Weir, only really comes alive when she's leering at or stalking her prey. Genre fans will also spot some familiar faces among the movie's ensemble cast, all of whom do their best with this ticky-shticky material. They curse, enough to seem like they're overcompensating for some things. They run around each other, mostly. They get picked off one by one. You already know what you're in for if you've come to Abigail to watch a body count caper, featuring plummy character actor performances from that guys like Kevin Durand and Dan Stevens. Most of their co-stars keep up in less attractive roles, including Melissa Barrera's thinly drawn anti-heroine team leader. There's also plenty of viscous-looking blood splatter and some modestly good-looking vampire makeup. The fangs, in particular. Some action scenes are well choreographed, but generally over-edited and shot just ahead of whatever's moving on screen. The rest of this 90-minute genre exercise is unfailingly conventional, though that's also a big part of its ostensible appeal. I can't really get or stay mad at Abigail for essentially delivering what its marketing promises. Sure, the movie's creators, led by co-helmers Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, better known as Radio Silence, directors of Ready or Not and the 2022 Scream reboot, could have delivered more, even though disenchanted viewers can't exactly claim false advertising. The setup is strictly by the numbers, and the characters are all stock types. A team of bickering misfits kidnaps the title character, Weir. They follow her home with a comically oversized gizmo stuck to the bottom of her chauffeur's car. Then they bring the 12-year-old looking girl to a secluded mansion where they're reminded of their mission stakes. Shady but well-dressed ringleader Lambert, Giancarlo Esposito, gives us and them the rundown. No real names, no cell phones. Nothing personal. It's 24 hours of babysitting a preteen who really likes to plie and step-toe her way through Swan Lake rehearsals. Simple is as simple does. We learn very little about everyone, thanks in no small part to a scene where Lambert nicknames the characters after members of the Rat Pack. Duran's character, a jolly but dim muscle bro named Peter, tries to find the sense in being nicknamed after rats. Later, he gets that it's a disposable pop culture reference and promptly moves on. Peter's the most sympathetic character in Abigail, partly because he's constantly straining against the limits of what his character can know and do. He's joined by a call sheet of tropes, including Abigail's minder, the empathetic and observant Joey, Melissa Barrera, their irritating and wasted driver Dean, the late Euphoria star Angus Cloud, and the strong, silent ex-soldier Rickles, William Catlett. Eventually, the team has to worry not only about Abigail, but a few predictable liabilities, like their bratty and easily bored electronics hacker Sammy, Kathryn Newton, and their foul-mouthed, inexplicably accented ex-cop backup leader, Frank Stevens. None of these party game-like character traits really matter once Abigail gets loose from her handcuffs. The house that Abigail's prey stay in has more personality, but it's basically the house from Clue with some extra gothy touch-ups. Maybe that's all you need to enjoy watching a game cast check off every box as they struggle to figure out how to stop a real vampire. Nothing worth writing home about comes to mind. It's hard to get too excited watching so many talented actors try and barely succeed in making you want to care about their characters, especially since that isn't the same thing as making you care. More could have been done with less tedious dialogue, as what's here is designed mostly just to hold the hands of viewers as the plot skips from beat to beat. More could have also been done with Joey, who at one point stuffs a loaded gun into her tight jeans waistband. I do, and I don't believe it. Abigail may find its audience given a lucky combination of good timing and wishful thinking. It's not badly made, just uninspired and played out. If you like B-movies made with a budget and are specifically looking for an undemanding time, Abigail might be for you. Abigail might also disappoint you, especially if you're hoping for more than what's advertised. Abigail pits a group of misfit criminals against their captive, a little ballerina dancer named Abigail. Much to their surprise, she's a powerful vampire. The movie is action-packed, with plenty of gore and laughs, but it is a station-to-station production that, while fun, telegraphs its moves well in advance. It's empty calories, but for many fans, sometimes this is exactly what you crave. With high hopes, I went into the world premiere of Abigail, which debuted at the Overlook Film Festival. This movie was one of my most looked forward to movies of 2024. It has a banger trailer, see below, and the history of radio silence includes Ready or Not, my favorite horror film of 2019. So my expectations were high. I also fully understand the aspirations of this film. This would be more like Renfield than Let the Right One in tone and texture. It aimed to entertain more than elevate the genre. Did it meet my expectations? I can give that a qualified yes, but it didn't quite earn the standing ovation that I had for Ready or Not. It carries a number of the trademark radio silence elements: strong visuals, stunning sets, terrific action, and splattery body explosions. The cast is a fun ensemble with strong defined characters, though I think that perhaps they need to give the audience more credit than to do an exposition dump of character descriptions. That exposition repeats often in the film, and it was a bit of a blunt instrument. The cast: Aisha Weir plays Abigail, the titular tiny dancer vampire. Melissa Barrera plays Joey, the face of the crew, the only one allowed to talk with Abigail. Dan Stevens plays Frank, an ex-cop and the easily frustrated team leader. Kathryn Newton plays Sammy, the flighty tech expert. Kevin Durand plays Peter, the not-so-bright muscle for the crew. Angus Cloud plays Dean, a junkie getaway wheelman. In a sad twist of irony, Cloud died last year from a drug overdose. There is a nice dedication for him in the end credits. William Catlett plays Rickles, an ex-military sniper, and the lookout for this group. Giancarlo Esposito plays Lambert, the team's fence and contact. A quick plot summary. A team of criminals assembles for a kidnapping at a massive estate where the young ballerina Abigail lives. Despite some sloppy operations, the gang anesthetizes the girl and escapes in a plumbing box van. It's all a little too easy, but this crew believes that their elite operational skills won the day. The kidnappers don't trust each other. This is a cold call assembly of talent who haven't worked together, so they assume names associated with the 60s Brat Pack. Check those names, you might recognize them. The crew is unaware of the identity of the child, though they had been promised $7 million each as a hostage negotiation price. They prepare for a long night, and while they should be on high alert for a job of this magnitude, most of them get drunk at the well-stocked bar. Curiosity gets the best of Frank. When he checks in on Abigail, he is stunned to discover that she is the daughter of Christophe Lazar, a notorious crime lord. Consequently, Frank wants out. However, the promise of money remains too great for most of the team, so they decide to gut it out until morning. The tides turn quickly when Dean is attacked by some mysterious force and is discovered decapitated in the kitchen. There is a group decision to cut and run, but the estate goes into lockdown mode, shuttering windows and barring the doors, trapping all inside. The mysterious force, of course, is Abigail. She now hunts the crew in the trap she has set for them. The predators have become prey and desperately seek a way out. All of the vampire tropes are in play, some of them more applicable than others, so it becomes a crapshoot of an escape plan for the trapped criminals. Evaluation. You could see the path forward for this movie from the moment the kidnapping scene began. The plot twists get bookmarked by character exposition. The characters ask the key questions out loud. Who is this girl, and why is she important? Who set the crew up for this trap? What are each of the characters' main motivations? What are the character flaws in each of the criminals that could jeopardize the mission? The characters answer many of these questions themselves, or, at a minimum, debate the possibilities amongst themselves. So no need for the audience to scratch their collective head. The cast is already doing it for you. The action in this movie pops. By the second act, the fighting is practically non-stop, with most of the characters suffering from some significant injuries that they eventually shrug off. Saving throws made. Since this is a radio silence production, you can expect some exploding bodies, and you get that with gusto. There is plenty of gore, but it is rather cartoonish and done to solicit cheers rather than screams. On that scale, it delivers. I equate Abigail to a high-end fast food burger meal with bottomless fries and shakes. Think Red Robin. This is a well-made, high-calorie, low-nutrition horror meal. It feels great going in and is satisfying without triggering the urge to analyze the story too much. There isn't a need to. What you see is what you get, and that's not all bad. Comfortable comps for this movie in tone and pacing would be Alien Resurrection, Blade 2, Predators, The Relic, and Renfield. Give high acting marks to Kevin Durand, who gets all the best lines for being the team's dimwit. Durant has tapped into the lovable, big, dumb, and funny guy that makes him endearing. Also, Aisha Weir does well in a difficult role. Young actors can struggle when trying to be menacing, and Weir makes for a very creepy little vampire. A bright acting future awaits Weir, which should help launch her into other good roles. Conclusion. Abigail is a crowd pleaser. It does target the widest demographic possible, and I think it will succeed here. The question will be how much of a marketing push Universal will put behind it. Last year, Universal didn't heavily support two similarly placed films I liked, Renfield and Last Voyage of the Demeter. These films flopped at the box office. Positive reactions from horror fans couldn't save them. If given a marketing push, it could succeed as a mid-tier hit like M3GAN was last year. Abigail provides broadly entertaining fare for horror fans and non-horror fans alike. One of the elements that you could see coming down the tracks was a big finale fight between characters that you would expect to be at odds, with Abigail as the material X factor. It is a big set-destroying throwdown, but par for the course, it also goes a bit too long. When operating in the shadow of superhero movies and kaiju battles, the epic closing sequence is to be expected, with a similarly overwrought, spectacular kinetic throwdown. Did the film live up to my lofty hopes? No. But it is still entertaining enough that I recommend a big screen viewing. Just know what you're getting into. It engages early, crackles with energy, has a spectacular series of fights, and is ready-made for a big bucket of popcorn and a large soda. It's a celebration of empty-calorie entertainment, right? The MPAA gave Abigail an R rating for language, gore, and violence. It earned that rating in spades. However, it is not a particularly disturbing movie, and mature teens should be able to handle it just fine. Abigail will be in wide release on April 19th in theaters across the USA. I've spoken before about going into some films completely blind, having not even seen a trailer. I wish I had done that for this. The more you know about Abigail, the worse it is. A lot of the film is spent with the killer in shadow, making you think the killings are being done by a hitman working for Abigail's mob boss father. But if you've seen the trailer, you know that Abigail is a vampire, so you know what's happening. To be fair, the title and the poster do that too. It's a film called Abigail, and the poster features that character in a blood-stained dress. So even if you don't know she's a vampire, you do know that she is responsible for the deaths. So the whole what is happening, it's a secret aspect of the opening half is wasted. I know we didn't see a lot of Jaws in the film of the same title, but we were aware it was a shark. We didn't spend half the time watching that film and being told it was hippo. Once the truth is revealed, it's a much better film. It's still good before that, but it definitely feels like it's holding back on you a little bit. It's shot like a horror movie before the characters know it's a horror movie. So the vampiric reveal doesn't come as a shock. It comes off as, well, that's what happens next in a horror film. Compare this to, say, From Dusk Till Dawn, which comes off as a heist movie for the first half, which means the vampiric shift comes off as a genuine shock. Here, you know it's a horror movie, so you're expecting something similar to what happens. They could have played it off like a heist movie, and it would have improved it. I'll admit that would have drawn comparisons to the aforementioned FDTD, but heist movies are cinematically different now than they were in the 90s. They're now more focused on straight lines, split-screen shots, etc. So whilst it would have been similar in terms of genre shift, the styles themselves would be different, which would have lessened comparisons. I'm over-exaggerating slightly, I'll admit. The sections before them are still pretty entertaining. That's mainly due to the cast, though. I'm a huge fan of both Kathryn Newton and Melissa Barrera, and they're both given a lot to work with even before shit gets bloody. The characters feel real, which helps sell the believability of this universe. The core group all mesh together well, to the point where their interactions don't feel like the script is just fleshing out doomed characters. Kevin Durand does look distractingly like an even dumber Elon Musk, though. The others are pretty much a bunch of mixed nuts. Frank, Dan Stevens, leads the crew and wears glasses that tell us he's slick and shifty like the gearbox on a Ferrari. Peter, Kevin Durand, is a man mighty of muscle but slow of mind. Rickles, Will Catlett, is the poker-faced sniper. Sammy, Kathryn Newton, is the sassy hacker. Dean, Angus Cloud, is the getaway driver who's got naught but a couple of chiclets rattling around where his brains should be. They snatch Abigail, Alicia Weir, and convene with plan mastermind Lambert, Giancarlo Esposito, in a dilapidated mansion with a giant elevator cage as a centerpiece. I wonder if it'll come in handy at all should anyone need it. And decor ranging from cluster o antlers, light fixtures, to gross taxidermy and crumbling old frescoes. No, really, frescoes. I'm sure nothing bad has ever happened in this place. It's a bit of a fixer-upper, but after several thousand hours of work and exorcisms, it'll be so cozy. Being the nice person around here, relatively speaking, Joey comforts poor little Abigail, who's still wearing her tutu from ballet rehearsal. Being the shitbird around here, and the specific breed of shitbird played by Dan Stevens, Frank threatens poor little Abigail with his gun, and finds out she's the daughter of a notorious gazillionaire who's rumored to have a henchman capable of tearing people apart like an animal. That might, keyword here being might, explain how one of them ends up with their head being detached from their body in a rather disgusting and hilarious fashion. And just when you thought this crew of crooks had exchanged enough prickly getting-to-know-you banter, well, when people are fighting for their lives, they really get to know each other, especially their insides, and extra especially when those insides become outsides. It's no secret that Abigail is the vampire around these parts, and that she likes to ply and jet in between masticating her victims. It's in the trailers and everything. So obviously the sequel needs to be Abigail vs. M3 Gan. Abigail vs. M3 Gan! Someone needs to make Abigail vs. M3 Gan! I mean, why couldn't it exist in a world that gave us Freddy versus Jason? Performance worth watching. Barrera is a terrific final girl, and Weir throws herself whole hog into the demonic role. It's a lot of fun hearing this adorable kid spew obscenities like a sailor who accidentally dropped anchor on his toe. Stevens has his terrifically sleazy moments, and Durand delivers some nicely modulated comedy. But I gotta go with Lisa Frankenstein herself, Newton, who slays a few one-liners and makes the absolute most out of the movie's most demented sequence. Abigail is one of those movies that technically has a big twist, but if you're aware of the movie at all of the marketing, including the trailers, has spoiled the shit out of that big twist already, and it happens early enough in the film that the twist is kind of also the premise, which makes it hard to talk about. So this sentence will serve as the spoiler-free review. Abigail is kind of a failure as a horror movie. I am bad at horror movies, and I have been since I became a father, and I was never scared. It is, however, a pretty damn effective, predictable, but wildly entertaining horror-adjacent action slasher film, and all in all, I'm going to recommend it, so long as you go in with the proper expectations. Expect something closer to From Dusk Till Dawn than to The Exorcist or Paranormal Activity, and you'll be fine. So yeah, spoilers from here out, although once you know the premise, you already know the broad strokes of the movie. Alicia Weir, am I right? I haven't seen a child actor this effective since season 1 of Stranger Things, Millie Bobby Brown, and I really don't think Millie has ever had a role that allowed her to cut loose the way Weir gets to in this movie. Millie has never gotten a line as iconic as "I'm sorry for what's going to happen to you." But let's back up and talk about the actual movie. Abigail starts off as a heist movie, as a group of criminals kidnap a little girl from a massive mansion and then, rather inexplicably, spirit her off to a similarly massive but much older and creepier mansion out in the middle of nowhere, where Giancarlo Esposito tells them to wait with the girl for 24 hours, during which time he'll extract a $50 million ransom from her father, which they can all split and then be off on their separate ways. Only, oops, the little girl is a vampire, and well, it doesn't go great for them. This plan has some flaws even before you get to the vampire, and my wife called another minor twist early on. All of the kidnappers have screwed over this little girl's vampire crime lord father at some point or another, and she's managed to bring them all here so she can hunt and kill them. 2 of them die before it's immediately clear what's going on, and the reactions of the rest to being hunted by an actual vampire are kind of hilarious. Eventually, the main female character survives, blah, blah, blah. You know how this is going to go. This movie rides on the strength of its atmosphere and its characters, and the house is effectively creepy. Amelia's penchant for tossing ballet moves into her fighting style, and her hunting. Watching her tiptoe across a stairway banister on her way to try and kill somebody is impressively fucked up. Her movement and physicality throughout the movie is excellently done, and the gore level is turned up to 15. The number of bodies and or body parts that literally explode in this movie is significant. And again, the characters are fun, if broadly drawn. The ex-undercover cop turned criminal, the dim-bulb Quebecois muscle guy, the e-girl hacker, and the main character with a dark past, along with an ex-Marine and a druggy wheelman, plus Giancarlo fucking Esposito, who has never in his life not elevated anything he was in. The biggest problem with the movie is that everyone in it looks like someone more famous than them. The Quebecer looks like Elon Musk. The hacker looks like Winona Ryder circa Beetlejuice. The ex-cop is not Ryan Gosling, and the druggie is basically playing the exact same character he played in Euphoria, which I guess isn't quite the same thing, but it's still kind of weird. They all bounce off of each other nicely, and most of them get at least a couple of cool moments here and there to chew some scenery of their own. I mean, this moment here. I love it. The house itself is straight out of Resident Evil, and I mean it as a compliment when I say this movie would make a great video game, although it kind of already did, except with a little ballerina girl instead of 9.5-foot-tall Lady Dimitrescu. The scenery is great, the pool scene is horrifying, the plosions are gross, the characters are fun, and at least some of the acting is absolutely phenomenal. Again, it's not scary, so don't go in wanting that. But I'm really glad we actually sat down and watched this last night. I don't watch many movies anymore, so I like to be able to recommend them when I do. 2 thumbs up. It's tough when your movie's premise also happens to be its biggest and best reveal. The new horror film Abigail follows a group of kidnappers who capture a rich man's daughter after ballet rehearsal and stash her away in a safe house, whereupon they discover that the little girl, played by Alicia Weir, is a vampire, and that they're actually locked in there with her, not the other way around. To be clear, this is all in the trailer. It's the reason for the movie's very existence. Come see the tiny ballerina vampire butcher these hapless kidnappers. It's not a bad sell either. I was intrigued by the movie when I first saw the trailer, and I remained so even after being forced to watch it approximately 398 more times. Still, I couldn't also help but wonder how Abigail might have played if one were to go into it a blank slate. If we didn't know it was a vampire story and were simply pulled along with the rest of the cast into the creepy goings-on at this suspiciously giant mansion in the middle of nowhere. We don't discover that poor, whimpering Abigail is actually a fanged, undead, and acrobatic beast until about 40 minutes into the movie, as the girl casually slips her bonds and shrieks and bares her fangs at her thunderstruck captors. The young Irish actress Weir, who made such an impression in the recent Matilda remake, strikes a convincingly helpless pose up until that point, and once Abigail lets go, her loose-limbed, surreally pirouetting savagery sends the picture spinning in a bloody new direction. It's a great reveal, and it could have made a fine surprise if modern movie marketing would let it. What if we could go into these films, yes, even the big IP-driven studio ones, without knowing anything about them? I'm not about to argue, however, that Abigail would be some kind of secret masterpiece if we could only have stayed spoiler-free. That would have required more thought and care put into its characters. Instead, before learning about Abigail's true nature, we watch this somewhat clueless collection of anonymous kidnappers start bickering unconvincingly among themselves. They're not supposed to reveal their true identities and are only referred to by names from the Rat Pack, but one of them, the street-smart Joey, Melissa Barrera, a former addict, is such a good reader of people that she deduces each person's background right away. There's Frank, Dan Stevens, a former detective who went corrupt. Sammy, Kathryn Newton, a thrill-seeking rich girl hacker. Rickles, Will Catlett, a former Marine. Peter, Kevin Durand, a muscle-bound former mob goon who looks like someone tried to Brundlefly Elon Musk and an aging Arnold Schwarzenegger. And Dean, Angus Cloud, an intellectually challenged sociopathic getaway driver. Aside from Barrera's Joey, these are more caricatures than people, since they're mostly there to be picked off. So maybe the anticipation of impending vampire shenanigans is a boon in this regard. It keeps us from thinking too hard about this ridiculous kidnapping scheme and from caring too much about any of these people. One exception is Cloud's Dean. The young Euphoria actor died unexpectedly last July, right after wrapping Abigail, and his offbeat energy is at times so captivating that we miss it when he's not on screen. Knowing that the actor is no more makes the loss even deeper. Ultimately, Abigail settles into a fairly predictable rhythm of people running around a dark mansion getting killed one by one, but it does occasionally demonstrate a twisted playfulness. Abigail is a ballerina, after all, and she delights in dancing as much as she delights in slaughter. When she begins to control one character's mind, vampires can do that, you know, she first makes the other person dance, which sounds just as weird as it feels on screen in a good way. Alas, the problem with such brief moments of inspiration is that they usually make us wonder why there aren't more of them. At times, Abigail seems more interested in its rating than its characters or story. It's proudly rated R, not so much for intensity or any genuinely disturbing material, but because every other line of dialogue appears to be fuck, and it's filled with people exploding in, admittedly hilarious supernovas of blood. It's a cheap thrill movie, and on that score it mostly delivers. There are beheadings and face shreddings and throat rippings and blood vomiting and a pool filled with shit and corpses. The amped-up gore elevates the film's schlock value, but not its suspense, and certainly not its potency. So maybe I should take it all back. Abigail probably only works if you know exactly what it's going in. Abigail is the new film by Radio Silence, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, the team previously behind Ready or Not, Scream 2022, and Scream 6. The film is a blood-soaked wild ride filled with scares, twists, and turns, and great practical effects that, for sure, will have horror fans and theatergoers entertained. The film follows a team of 6 petty criminals who are hired by a man named Lambert, played by Giancarlo Esposito, to kidnap the daughter of a wealthy businessman and hold her for a ransom. The team of 6 consists of Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, Kathryn Newton, William Catlett, Kevin Durand, and the late Angus Cloud. They all get code names given to them by Lambert in a scene that reminds me of similar scenes in other heist films, such as Reservoir Dogs. This way, they have names to refer to each other and not risk themselves or the little girl Abigail hearing their real names. It seems like a fairly simple job at first. Kidnap and watch over the little girl at an old mansion that Lambert has for them to hold her until they hear from her father about the ransom money. It is not long, though, till things start going south and they realize the mistake they made. Abigail is no ordinary little girl, but a bloodthirsty vampire. Now the team must put aside any distrust and work together to survive the night. The cast overall are great, and each brings something unique to their respective characters and how they interact with one another. The standout, though, is Alicia Weir as Abigail, who gives a wonderful performance as the titular character. The way she shifts from playing as scared little Abigail to the bloodthirsty vampire shows great acting talent. There is something so thrilling about seeing the carnage she unleashes. Abigail review. The film is definitely a bloody good time with some great kills and the use of practical blood and gore effects. There are twists and turns in the plot, some funny moments, and then just some silly things here and there that make it a film you can just sit back and not have to overthink and just enjoy a fun new entry in horror vampire films. It's a fun watch because you can tell that Radio Silence is not trying to reinvent the wheel or do anything too groundbreaking with it, but just make a really fun, bloody vampire movie yet they still make it feel like its own thing with elements from their past films, most notably Ready or Not, while including the staple things in most vampire films. So if you're looking for a fun and bloody time at the movies, go sink your fangs into Abigail, out on April 18th. 2024, only in theaters. The film was officially titled Abigail in January 2024, casting in April 2023. Melissa Barrera was cast one of the main roles of the film after previously appearing in the filmmaking duo Screen Films. The following month, Dan Stevens, Kevin Durand, Alicia Weir, Kathryn Newton, Angus Cloud, and will Catlett join the cast in June 2023. It was announced that Giancarlo Esposito was cast in a supporting role, Weir known for her role as Matilda. Wormwood in the 2022 Netflix musical film was later revealed to be playing Dracula's daughter. Filming principal photography began on June 30th, 2023 in Dublin, Ireland, under the working title Abducting Abigail, but filming was suspended in July due to the 223 SAG. After strike, Aaron Morton serves as the cinematographer. Cloud finished filming his scenes prior to his death on July 31st, 2023. Filming wrapped on December 15th of the same year. Music: Brian Tyler composed the film score. He collaborated with Bettinelli-Olpin and Gillett on prior projects. The directors commissioned Gene Dawson for an original song, Burn My Tongue, which plays over the closing credits. The soundtrack album featuring Tyler's score and Burn My Tongue was released on April 19. Release: Abigail had its world premiere at the Overlook Film Festival on April 7th, 2024, and was released by Universal Pictures in the United States. On April 19, 2024, box office, as of April 21st, 2024, Abigail has grossed $113 million in the United States and Canada and $15 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $1,153 million in the United States and Canada. Abigail was released alongside The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare and Spy Family Code, White, and was projected to gross $1,215 million from 3,384 theaters in its opening weekend. The film made $14 million on its first day, including $11 million from Thursday night previews. It went on to debut to $2 million, finishing second at the box office behind holdover Civil War critical response on the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes. 85% of 160 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 69/10. The website's consensus reads, carrying off well-worn vampire tropes with a beatick flourish, Abigail dances around the familiarity of its premise with a game cast and slick-style Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 62 out of 100 based on 35 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences pulled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an A+ to F scale. Tim Roby of The Telegraph awarded the movie 4 stars out of 5, saying Alicia Weir goes impressively off the mark. Deep end in this horror thriller about 6 criminals who get more than they bargained for. Abigail movie review. The trailer for Abigail tells you almost everything you need to know about the movie. A wacky high-concept horror thriller about a group of kidnappers who bite off more than they can chew when they unwittingly abduct a child-sized vampire ballerina. The vamp, played with some relish by Alicia Weir, only really comes alive when she's leering at or stalking her prey. Genre fans will also spot some familiar faces among the movie's ensemble cast, all of whom do their best with this tick-why, shtick-why material. They curse enough to seem like they're overcompensating for some things. They run around each other. Mostly they get picked off one by one. You already know what you're in for. If you've come to Abigail to watch a body count cap featuring plumy character actor performances from guys like Kevin Durand and Dan Stevens, most of their co-stars keep up in less attractive roles, including Melissa Barr's thinly drawn anti-heroine team leader. There's also plenty of viscous-looking blood splatter and some modestly good-looking vampire makeup, the fangs in particular. Some action scenes are well choreographed, but generally over-edited and shot just ahead of whatever is moving on screen. The rest of this 90-minute genre exercise is unfailingly conventional, though. That's also a big part of its ostensible appeal. I can't really get or stay mad at Abigail for essentially delivering what its marketing promises. Sure, the movies. Creators led by Kuhlhelmers, Bettinelli-Olpin, and Tyler Gillett, better known as radio silence directors of Ready or Not. And the 2022 Scream reboot could have delivered more, even though disenchanted viewers can't exactly claim false advertising. The setup is strictly by the numbers, and the characters are all stock types. A team of bickering misfits kidnaps the title character Weir. They follow her home with a comically oversized gizmo stuck to the bottom of her chauffeur's car. Then they bring the 12-year-old looking girl to a secluded mansion where they're reminded of their mission stakes shady but well-dressed ringleader Lambert Giancarlo Esposito gives us. And then the rundown: no real names, no cell phones, nothing personal. It's 24 hours of babysitting a preteen who really likes to pie and step-toe her. Way through Swan Lake rehearsal, simple is as simple does. We learn very little about everyone, thanks in no small part to a scene where Lambert nicknames the characters after members of the Rat Pack. Duran's character, a jolly but dim muscle bro named Peter, tries to find the sense in being Nick, named after Rat. Later he gets that it's a disposable pop culture reference and promptly moves on. Peter's the most sympathetic character in Abigail, partly because he's constantly straining against the limits of what his character can know and do. He's joined by a call sheet of tropes, including Abigail's minder, the empathetic and observant Joey Melissa Barrera, their irritating and wasted driver Dean, the late Euphoria star Angus Cloud, and the strong silent EXs, Soldier Rickles, William Catlett. Eventually the team has to worry not only about Abigail, but a few predictable liabilities like their bratty and easily bored electronics hacker Sammy Kathryn Newton and their foul-mouthed, inexplicably accented ex-cop backup leader Frank Stevens. None of these party game-like character traits really matter once Abigail gets loose from her handcuffs. The house that Abigail's prey stay in has more personality, but it's basically the house from Clue with some extra goth-y touch-ups. Maybe that's all you need to enjoy watching a game. Cast check off every box as they struggle to figure out how to stop a real vampire. Nothing worth writing home about comes to mind. It's hard to get too excited watching so many talented actors try and barely succeed in making you want to care about their characters, especially since that isn't the same thing as making you care more. Could have been done with less tedious dialogue, as what's here is designed mostly just to hold the hands of viewers. As the plot skips from beat to beat, more could have also been done with Joey, who at one point stuffs a loaded gun into her tight jeans waistband. And I don't believe it. Abigail may find its audience given a lucky combination of good timing and wishful thinking. It's not badly made, just uninspired and played out, if you like, B-movies made with a budget and are specifically looking for an undemanding time. Abigail might be for you. Abigail might also disappoint you, especially if you're hoping for more than what's advertised. After a group of criminals kidnap the ballerina daughter of a powerful underworld figure, they retreat to an isolated mansion, unaware that they're locked inside with no normal little girl. There is returning to basics after spending some time in the IP zone, and then there is trying to recapture what are ed industry eyebrows to NAB, that job in the first place, with Abigail coming from a slightly different angle, but mostly remaking the same movie. Those filmmakers are Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, collectively known as Radio Silence, having taken over the Scream franchise for a while following their success, responsible for the mind-bending Wedding Day survival thriller Ready or Not, which pitted its bride against wealthy in-laws, teasing the possibility of a curse. Abigail is about a vampire, borrowing much of the same imagery from Ready or Not. right down to exploding bodies and a lead soaked in blood by the ending, similarly distressing for the closing shot to the point where it feels like radio silence, plagiarizing themselves tonally. It is also going for dark humor comprised of characters who at times are seemingly intended to be annoying, so viewers cheer on the kills, mixed with some genuinely disturbing visuals dancing with a headless core before slaughtering more victims, and some forced emotional beats that indisputably do not fit here. These characters are a group of criminals with no connection to each other, hired by Giancarlo Esposito's Lambert to kidnap 12-year-old ballerina Abigail, an impressive performance from Alicia Weir, game for every demented action the filmmakers ask of her, while also believably playing up naivety and manipulating others, bring her to an abandoned mansion that feels like an elaborate building ripped straight out of a classic Resident Evil game, from strange insignia engraved over doors to secret areas pulling up and biding time, waiting for a hefty sum of ransom money from her career criminal father. The group is unaware of his identity or reputation. Of course, each character has a particular skill, ranging from computer hacking to getaway driver and more, but for better or worse, the ensemble is allowed ample room to inject some scenery chewing personality into these archetypes, since it is better for no one to know each other's real name or backstory. They are given Rat Pack cod names to refer to one another. Emerging as an unofficial leader of the group is Joey Melissa Barra, a solid performer here, and down to get dirty, just as Samara Weaving did before for Radio Silence, and also the former star of their Scream installments before Hollywood unceremoniously kicked her to the curb for daring to have a voice and say some things that needed to be said regarding current events. A disgraced Army medic turned recovering junkie, capable of easily reading those surrounding her instantly. Joey deduces that Frank, a neurotic, brash Dan Stevens, is a former detective who came close to bringing down the criminal enterprise. Abigail's father heads Rickles. William Catlett is a former soldier. Sammy, technology-obsessed. Kathryn Newton has entered a life of crime for thrill-seeking Peter. Kevin Durand is a musclehead enforcer due to a past of being bullied, and Dean Angus Cloud is a boisterous sociopath. Each performer fully leans into their respective archetype, sometimes to a grim degree considering how long and drawn out an otherwise simple premise feels. The group agrees that Joey should be the only one to enter the room. They have Abigail handcuffed inside. She is the most sensitive of the bunch, and reassures the girl that they only want money and that nothing bad will happen to her. Abigail understands, but not before breaking the unfortunate news that her father doesn't care about her. He will come. She creepily apologizes for what he will do, while tipping her off that one of the group is a traitor working for him. Soon a waiting game turns into surviving the night locked inside the mansion. One of the few fascinating aspects here is that the screenplay from Stephen Shields and regular Radio Silence collaborator Gaius seems to instantly shoot down predictions or reveal what's expected as the film unfolds. Their writing and line of thinking often align with the viewer, but as the film goes on, it begins to feel as if they believe they are one step ahead when they aren't. Abigail is not that clever of a film. During the back half, numerous questions arise, not only in the storytelling rules, but also in character behavior. These characters talk about vampire lore, yet do nothing. When one of their own is bitten, unsurprisingly, this character turns into a vampire under mind control of the main source of terror here. The filmmakers take so much time before officially revealing it that it doesn't feel right to mention it in a review, even if the trailers most likely spoil it at the most convenient time. A character also suddenly realizes that to escape, all that needs to be done is rebooting a power source for the building to remove all the electronic barriers and gates. Something that logically would have been the first suggestion. The upside to Abigail is that Radio Silence knows how to put leads through the ringer in a night of endangered, bloody hell, while ensuring that it is reflected through practical effects, covering them in red. The action-based survival sequences are satisfyingly gory, irritatingly caught between storytelling that doesn't know if it wants to be humorous, scary, or say something dramatically moving about parental relationships and redemption. That's a ballet radio silence doesn't pull off, despite delivering dismemberment and gooey goods. Other information about this film: from the moment the film was announced a year ago, Abigail has been marketed as a remake of Dracula's Daughter, the 1936 Universal Pictures curio. So it's no spoiler to say that the title character of Abigail is Dracula's daughter. Yet, if you went in not knowing that it might be the only real surprise in the movie, apart from what a brutally monotonous, blood-vomiting genre mashup it is, for a while we think we're watching a standard kidnap thriller. It opens with Abigail Alicia Weir, who is 12, on the ballet stage rehearsing Swan Lake, a most definite vampire homage since T. Chauvy's gorgeous, heart-swelling score is the same music that played over the opening credits of the 1931 Bela Lugosi Dracula. That lyrical ente ends in about 3 minutes, as the kidnappers all over state did profane synthetic crudeness jam themselves into a van and abscond with Abigail, who they take to a hideaway mansion and stash in one of the bedrooms. If the crime goes off as planned, each of them will get due $7 million in ransom money. But with their fake names and bumptious bickering, which starts in scene 1 and rarely lets up, they're like characters in a bargain basement. Gloss on the desperate hours crossed with Reservoir Dogs crossed with the worst, a 24-house party horror film. You what could imagine Dracula's Daughter made to cash in on the original Dracula's success, though it had none of the same actors, was a rather staggy London fog monster movie starring Gloria Holden, who plays the title character like Greta Garbo as an aristocratic mesmerist. Yet the film has a cult dimension. There's a scene with Holden and the woman she fastens on to model for a painting that has homoerotic overtones, at least for 1936. I hadn't seen the movie in decades. But it reminded me of something I've always liked about studio system horror films, that there's a dramatic lightness to them even when they're all about the darkness, whereas Abigail is so heavy and excessive that if Sam Piena saw it, he might say, Jesus, tone it down. Abigail's father, we learn early on, is Christophe Lazar, Matthew Good, a demonically vicious and omnipotent underworld boss who has a way of slashing his enemies to ribbons. He can get into places where there's no explanation for it. And Abigail, though she apparently doesn't like her father very much as a chip off the old ripper, before long she sprouts razor teeth and turns into a feral child, going at the kidnappers one by one she's toying with. Them as a kind of game, and a few of them get turned into vampires, which has the remarkable effect of changing their personalities without making them any less boring. One or two explode, sort of like John Cabot at the end of the Cup. Fury, though, with more splatter and less apocalyptic elegance, as played by Dan Stevens, who italicizes everything Frank, the leader of the gang, though even he's just a thug for hire, is the most tedious. He's an embattled, yeppy nerd, testy, and rancor, and he never stops yelling. The other characters yell back. I make a point of this because there's so much oppositional energy in Abigail that it tamps down our impulse to identify with anyone. Sammy, Kathryn Newton, the Catholic punk, Peter, Kevin Durand, the Siouan, Hulk, who's like Elon Musk, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, Frank the Dick. These are characters who seem programmed to annoy us. Angus Cloud in his final performance plays Dean, who is blitzed but mellow, a real Cloud combination. You feel the presence that was lost. And Melissa Barrera from In the Heights and the last two Scream films grows more forceful as the movie goes on. She plays Joey Adrugi, who is given a maudlin and ineffective backstory about the son she abandoned, but she's the one actor on hand who seems to understand the value of toning down the noise Abigail was net. Directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, who made those last two Scream films. And though I was impressed to a degree by what they brought off there, this movie feels like a step backward into over at generic shell block. Why does a vampire movie need to be so relentlessly physical with whacked limbs and decapitations and bodies slammed into walls? Dracula, among other things, is the most metaphorical character in horror film history, and I guess his daughter could be too, but not in a film that turns blood-sucking into a form of professional wrestling genres. Collide in Abigail, the insanely bloody and equally bonkers new film from co-directors Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett. VHS Scream Roman 6, the duo's latest effort mixes action, survival, vampire, horror, and black comedy into one grisly B-movie. Cocktail that should have been a lot better than it actually is. What we end up with is an unfortunate misfire built on the misguided notion that if you throw enough blood and F-bombs at your audience, they won't notice the flaws. The movie's biggest draw, maybe it's fun and all, and cast Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, Kathryn Newton, Kevin Durand, and even the great Giancarlo Esposito all have parts in its killer ensemble. But the cast member many people will be talking about is 14-year-old Alicia Weir. She plays the film's titular character, and let's just say her performance has some bite to it. But a good cast can only do so much, especially when they're frequently left to get by on nothing but their own charm and charisma. In this case, the chief culprit is the script written by Stephen Shields and Guy Buck. The premise is simple enough and perfect for lots of fun genre indulgences. They have all sorts of cool inspiration they're pulling from. And again, there's that cast who all seem fully committed to whatever they're asked to do. When all considered, this should have been a sure thing, but the paper-thin characters and the shallow dialogue starts to wear on you. Unfortunately for us, the film doesn't veer from its formula, so we're left with more arguing, more F-bombs, and less brain cells. Abigail opens by introducing us to a group of kidnappers, each with broadly defined specialties and even broader personalities. They're complete strangers to each other, but handpicked by their employer. There's the hard-nosed leader, Frank Stevens, the medic, Joey Barrera, the dense but lovable muscle, Peter Durand, the D young hacker, Sammy Newton, the zoned-out getaway driver, Dean, the late Angus Cloud, and Rickles, Catlett, the teen sniper. Because what team doesn't need a sniper? Their job is to kidnap a young girl named Abigail Weir as she returns home. From ballet practice, they pull it off with remarkable precision and then drive the girl out to an abandoned mansion in the middle of nowhere where their handler named Lambert Esposito is waiting when they arrive. Lambert informs them that they are to stay at the mansion and watch Abigail for 24 hours while he retrieves the hefty ransom from her wealthy yet mysterious father. After he returns, they'll all get paid and can go their separate ways as the SI settle in for the next several hours. The movie tries to open up their characters through some back and forth that don't really add much depth at all. They mostly argue and insult each other, which makes them more insufferable than interesting. There are a couple of exceptions. Newton is by far the most entertaining, possessing an infectiously wacky energy that I kind of love. Durand has some really funny lines, but the writers overplay the dumb card, and Catlett is the least offensive, only because his character is the most thinly sketched of them all, and that leads to the film's big reveal. It's early on and in all the advertising, so not really a spoiler. Abigail isn't the sweet, innocent little girl fearing for her life. She's actually a vampire, and her 6 kidnappers are what's on the menu. It's a crazy turn of events that gives a little more context to the film's hilarious tagline, "Children can be such monsters." From there, Abigail follows the 6 as they try to survive while sealed inside a sprawling mansion with a literal bloodthirsty vampire. Again, it's a premise that should be a slam dunk, but the movie uses all of its tricks early, and then rather than try some new ones, it just uses the old ones over and over. Again, the humor dries up pretty quick, and there's not a scare to be found anywhere, and the one swing at an emotional payoff doesn't land and isn't earned at all. I don't want to sound like there's nothing to like about Abigail. Again, the cast is a fun one, with Newton being the brightest light. The oceans of blood can be quite fun early on, and there are a smattering of genuinely funny lines Abigail uttering. I like to play with my food remains my favorite. But in this case, the good can't outweigh the bad, and my brain had already checked out before the seemingly never-ending final battle arrived. Abigail is in theaters now. Positive elements. So who exactly does one root for in the movie? Abigail, a movie that pits a half-dozen dastardly criminals against a very hungry supernatural bloodsucker. You root for Joey, that's who, in a film in which everyone's morality is either seriously fractured or absolutely shattered. Joey's the most likable of the lot. Sure, she's made some mistakes. It's established early on that she's a recovering drug addict, but Joey also has a child of her own whom she loves a great deal. She takes the job, in fact, so she can be a real mom to him again. And because Abigail appears to be about the same age as her own little boy, Joey's pretty protective of the pint-sized ballerina. She even pinky swears with Abigail that she'll keep her safe. Obviously, that pinky swear that comes with some unexpected caveats. Still, the thought was nice enough and meant sincerely, and before Abigail reveals her true nature, Joey indeed keeps her more aggressive workmates at bay as much as possible. Abigail, the film, comes with a few twists and turns, which I'll try not to spoil, but we can say that some of the kidnappers turn out to be more kindly and supportive than you might expect, and we see characters form unexpected alliances and show at times unexpected grace, spiritual elements. Peter, one of the kidnappers, is Christian. We see him pray in a bit of a panic, cross himself, and clutch a crucifix that hangs around his neck. You'd think that crucifix would come in handy. Right, wrong, imagine. Peter's disappointment when Abigail grabs the small crucifix and starts stabbing him in the shoulder with it. But while Abigail may not be cowed by Christian symbols or trappings, she's still a supernatural entity. She can levitate. For one thing, she can control other vampires under certain circumstances, possessing them in a way and turning them into undead puppets. And while vampires here are not at all affected by Cross's light, is still a huge threat, as are wooden stakes, both of which continue to embrace a tang of supernatural spirituality. Some say that wooden stakes are effective against vampires because of wood's role in Christ's crucifix fiction, and the sun's power is obviously a symbol for light's triumph over darkness. Sexual content. One kidnapper, Dean, unsuccessfully flirts with a female co-worker, Sammy. He asks her at an inopportune time whether she has a boyfriend or not. At another juncture, he sneaks into a room she's in and suggests that they might have some physical fun together. She throws him out. Yet another kidnapper, Rickles, invites Joey into his own hiding spot, apparently with an eye towards some off-the-books extracurricular activity. Joey seems tempted, but she demurs. Someone draws a picture of a penis on a sleeping man's face. Violent content. The good old days in 1922's German horror film Nosferatu. The titular vampire dies when the sun hits him and he vanishes into nothing. In 1931's Dracula, not a single drop of blood, human or vampire, was shed on screen. Fast forward a century, give or take, and we find that vampires are much Messier eaters, and they die messily too. First, the eating part. Abigail mentions she likes playing with my food, and so she does. One victim is propped up at a kitchen table headless while its severed cranium teeters nearby. Others have their throats torn open, with plenty of other damage done to the bodies too. Someone remarks that it looks like a victim has been torn apart by a wild animal. Vampires devour portions of their victims while the victims are still alive, and Abigail seems to revel in spreading blood around her face as if it was foundation cream. We hear grotesque stories about how she killed previous victims, and one kidnapper stumbles on a swimming pool filled with dozens of floating dead bodies. Meanwhile, instead, a fading away with Nosferatu, like modesty-doomed vampires explode with all the blood and gore and entrails you'd expect. Folks in the presence of such explosions are coated in red, and someone picks an unidentifiable internal organ off her shirt. A character is skewered in the leg with a sharpened billiard stick. A crucifix, as mentioned, is used as a stabbing weapon. People fall off balconies and tumble down flights of stairs. The spine of one character grotesquely snaps. Car characters are skewered by stakes and other very pointy instruments of doom. Someone gets a splinter in his finger. Characters are shot, sometimes repeatedly. And if those characters are vampires, the wounds quickly heal. Crude or profane language. We're looking at more than 100 Fords, sometimes wedged in between Jesus and Christ, and perhaps 20's words. We also hear A, B, C, H, and D in, and we see a number of obscene gestures flashed. Characters misuse both God's and Jesus' name multiple times. The former, sometimes with the word D in drug and alcohol content. Joey once had a serious drug problem, and Frank, the team's leader, won't let her forget it. He notes her penchant for wearing long sleeves to hide track marks. He says her habit of sucking on candy, a common substitute for consuming other substances, and when she refuses to drink with Frank and her other workmates. He wonders how long she's been out of rehab, and if she's concerned about a relapse. He says that you can never trust a junkie to her credit. Joey's doing everything she can to stay clean and earn trust once again. Meanwhile, the other characters drink, and some drink quite heavily. Perhaps not the best of strategies when locked in with a vampire. But I digress. Dean is perhaps the most impaired kidnapper, swelling alcohol out of bottles, lighting bongs, and smoking a huge marijuana blunt. Other negative elements. When a character finds a stash of dead bodies, she throws up grotesquely in a sink, but that's really a warm-up for what's to come later. A character projectile vomits about a barrel of blood, a flow that eventually slows to a mere ooze. Characters deceive and betray each other. Conclusion. One of the more interesting aspects of Abigail is that no one is quite who or what they might seem. No one on the kidnapping crew is using their real name. Everyone has untold secrets revealed in the film's own sweet time, and obviously Abigail. That seemingly innocent 12-year-old girl has her own secret that soon pours out like blood from severed jugulars. But when it comes to the movie itself, well, that's exactly what it seems. Oh, sure, the film has some twists. It's also clever, funny, and occasionally even heartfelt. But the movie's makers know their audience. They know the people who fill the seats and gobble down popcorn, want blood and gore and decomposing bodies. Those viewers want to cringe and laugh in equal measure. They want to be absolutely horrified by a scene and find the same scene absolutely hilarious. Abigail is not the sort of horror movie to be taken all that seriously. It brings few weighty social issues to bear, trots out no metaphors to consider. Despite all the flesh we see perforated here, Abigail goes only skin deep. It star gobbles her victims as her viewers gobble their popcorn. But movies are on some level always serious business. What's the catch? The kidnapping squad sure could have asked that question before spending time with Abigail, and perhaps we movieers should ask the same thing, what you need to know. Abigail is a horror thriller about 6 criminals who kidnap a 10-year girl for a multi-million-dollar ransom. They are instructed to take the Abigail to a large, old-fashioned mansion in the country. Their handler greets them and says he'll be back in 24 hours with $150 million in ransom money. The crooks get more than they bargain. However, when Abigail literally turns out to be a little monster and her father a ruthless, powerful gangster, will anyone survive the night locked in the mansion with Abigail at first? The thriller aspects to Abigail are intriguing, however, as the terrifying secrets about the little girl are revealed. The movie becomes an exercise in bloody excess. Abigail, the movie, contains extreme bloody violence and at least 215 obscenities and profanities. It also has a mixed worldview. The most positive kidnapper is a young addict in recovery who wants to return to her young son. Her survival becomes dependent on the mercy of the monsters. Finally, when monsters are as powerful as the ones in Abigail, it makes the bloody horror movie less interesting and involving content-dominant worldview. Another worldview contentment, strong mixed pagan worldview, where the only positive characters, survival dependent on the mercy of vicious vampires with occult powers, foul language, at least 2 and 3. Obscenities, most are 4 to 8 strong profanities featuring the name of Jesus. Christ, 5 light profanities, 2 obscene gestures, and a girl vomits after seeing a gruesome mutilated corpse. Violence, extreme bloody scary violence, involves bloody vampire attacks and bloody fights with vampires, and includes vampire bodies, sometimes literally, explode when they're killed by some means such as sunlight. A vampire eats a piece of flesh in one scene. A bunch of bodies are later discovered, however, indicating that the vampires are not cannibals but mostly biters and blood. Suckers, a character agrees to be turned into a vampire to become powerful and steal the wealth of another vampire. But he miscalculates and is murdered in gruesome fashion. Vampire drives a spear into a character upper left shoulder. Spear is later pulled out of the person's body. People try to kill vampires by driving stakes through their chests. Vampire viciously flings normal people around, rats scare people, etc. More detail. Abigail is a horror thriller about 6 criminals who kidnap a 10-year girl for a multi-million ransom but get more than they bargained for when the girl turns out to be a vampire. And her father, a powerful gangster. Abigail has some thriller elements that are intriguing, but the movie's horror story soon turns out to be a bloody excess with constant foul language. The movie opens with the girl Abigail dancing to Swan Lake in an empty theater. When she's finished, she gets into a chauffeured limousine, which takes her home to a fancy small mansion. Meanwhile, 6 criminals in 2 vehicles are following the limousine, which has a tracker on the undercarriage at the house. The criminals snag Abigail from her bedroom. A young black-haired woman injects Abigail with something which knocks her out quickly. The crooks escape with Abigail in a large duffel bag. Just as her father enters the room, they have to get away quickly. However, when the yard lights come on outside, they drive a large van into the country to a large estate with a huge mansion. The furnishings inside look like something out of an old movie. They meet a middle-aged man who calls himself Lambert. He orders them not to use names and picks the black-haired woman with the syringe as the only one allowed to talk to Abigail. He also orders them to hold the girl for 24 hours, at which time he'll have picked up the $150 million ransom from Abigail's rich father. When the crooks complain that they don't know anyone's name and don't know who the girl's father is, Lambert says it's better that they not know names nor anything else about each other's background. When one of them complains again, Lambert gives them all fake names. He names the black-haired woman Joey, then leaves. The crooks raid the bar downstairs. There are 4 men and 2 women. They get to talking. And Joey says she can figure out who everyone is. She says the tall, thin man. Frank is probably an ex-cop who's gotten into some shady business. Frank figures out Joey is a recovery drug addict. That's why she likes to lick lollipops to curb her drug appetite. No wonder the girl wouldn't share her candy with me. The dumbest of the men, Dean says. Frank tells Joey it would be good if she can question the girl upstairs and find out who her father is upstairs. Joey befriends Abigail, who's worried that they're going to kill her. Joey promises she won't let them do that because she has a little boy, Abigail's age. Joey gets her to say who her father is, adding, "I'm sorry about what's going to happen to you downstairs." Joey tells her crooked colleagues the father's name, and he turns out to be a ruthless gangster known for having his enemies cut into bloody pieces. A couple of the crooks want to leave right away, but there's suddenly a locked gate blocking the front door. They all decide to stick it. out but set up some precautions when the other woman, a blonde gal, finds Dean's headless body in the kitchen. It turns out that Abigail isn't the innocent, scared little girl she appears to be. Also, thick steel plates come down to cover all the windows. Will anyone survive the night? Locked in the mansion with Abigail in the beginning, the thriller aspects to Abigail are intriguing. However, as the secrets about the little girl are revealed, the movie becomes an exercise in bloody excess. People are attacked by vampires. One vampire eats some flesh, and vampires explode when killed, spraying blood and body parts all over the place. There are other bloody twists as well. Abigail, the movie, also has at least 215 obscenities and profanities, most of them forward. Finally, the movie has a mixed worldview. For example, the movie's premise slightly uplifting because it focuses on Joey's desire to get away from the vampires and reunite with her young son. She left her son in the custody of his father to recover from her drug addiction. But now that she started her recovery, she's been finding it difficult to even contact him by phone. Thus, her character gives viewers someone to like, despite that the movie's extravagant vampire carnage and double crosses are distasteful and distressing. As is the constant, gratuitous foul language. In the end, the vampires are just too powerful, and Joey's survival depends on their mercy rather than God or even herself. When vampires are as powerful as the ones in Abigail, it makes the bloody horror in the vampire story less interesting and less involving. Heist check, vampire child check. Will anyone make it out alive? You will have to watch and see it yourself. Abigail has been on my radar for some time now. Following Kathryn Newton's interesting films of late with Lisa Frankenstein and Freaky, under her belt she seems to be on a horror streak. The same could easily be said about Melissa Barrera during her latest Scream films. But nothing could have prepared me for the performance from Alicia Weir as the titular character Abigail, based on and a reimagining of the 1936 Universal classic monsters film Dracula's Daughter. Abigail follows a group of professional criminals from different backgrounds and expertise. No one knows each other, and no one uses their real names. It's a classic heist movie setup where the criminals are tasked to kidnap the 12-year-old ballerina daughter of a powerful underworld figure, J. Carlo. Esposito Lambert assembled the scrappy bunch of criminals, announcing the prize. $150 million split 7 ways. All they have to do is babysit the girl for 24 hours in a manner resembling something out of a Resident Evil video game to obtain the prize. However, some of the manor's inhabitants begin to go missing, body parts, and soon they realize they are locked inside with a not-so-normal little ballerina girl. I would argue that knowing the twist is only half of the movie, because I genuinely adored the fact that the second half of the movie still invited so many questions and had me guessing where the plot was going to end up. But that does not mean the film was left less interesting when you knew Abigail was a vampire, a small ballerina. Vampire Weir's dance recital, AA murder chases were too hilarious, especially seeing some as big and muscular as Kevin Durand running away from a small child. The directorial duo of Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett continued to incorporate, blend, and create new grounds. In the horror genre, the two achieved a lot of success with the VHS franchise. Ready or Not and Scream V and Roman 6, every franchise or film the two have done pays homage to the horror roots while bending the rules horror fans have experienced before. I always enjoy horror films because of the gore, suspense, jump scares, and laughing at some of the characters, sometimes cringy dialogue. Abigail has a lot of these things, but done with just the right amount of horror and comedy. My favorite part of the story is how quickly the ragtag adult criminals accept the reality that the tween kid is truly a vampire. The fact that they got to brainstorming and theorizing so fast on how to slay her was even wilder. The acting from the whole cast was superb in this sense. I think it is so overdone in horror when characters are stuck in disbelief, like, oh, this can't be happening, or no, you're crazy. Sometimes the best horror films are the ones where you have to embrace the weirdness or absurdity to get the plot moving to the more unique aspects of the film. This is what made Abigail a fun ride. Dan Stevens stood out for me because he went for a Queens, New York accent, which I thought he did relatively well. He has been known to do many voices apart from his native English accent, like in the FX series Legion, or even most recently in Godzilla. X-Kong the New Empire, despite being from the UK, I thought his ability to sound like he was specifically from Queens was very impressive, or at least an interpretation of one that my Canadian self could appreciate. Newton playing the naive girl Sammy bordered on annoying with some of her antics, but was very true to the character in the end. She has a moment when they are brainstorming ideas to take down the tiny vampire. What are we talking about? Like an Rice or a True Blood, Twilight, very different kind of vampires. In retrospect, the mansion itself stood out to me as a character of its own. The fact that the audience and the characters do not know who or what. The manor is a mystery too, as the characters explore the home. It has a lot sagways and breakable walls. There was also a lot of history and lore packed into the house. Definitely giving off Resident Evil vibes, this attention to detail and how the characters interacted within the bounds of the house was immaculate. Weir stole the show as the titular character because she really perfected the concept of appearing like an old vampire stuck in a child's body once the facade was broken through. What I found profound about this film was that it was not a typical Predator pre-situation movie. Abigail did not immediately go off killing people. This movie is smarter than that. She literally played with her food. By doing this, we get to see a lot more thinking and problem solving from the criminals trapped in the vampire's den. This band of misfit criminals went through some decent experiment of old vampire tropes, and it was so clumsy and great to see. Let us just say the characters had a lot of time to do some trial and error. One very nitpick scene I face-palmed at was when a character did the typical line and fighting stance. They put their hands up after getting beaten and said a line like, "You're going down," even though the character did nothing to change their power dynamics over the villain. It made for good laughing material, though, in terms of practical effect. X and VFX CGI Abigail brought some heat. The movie utilized a fair mix of it all. The practical effects stood out to me the most, of course, with things like decapitations and severed limbs. But really, this film brought gallons of fake blood. It may not have been a river like in The Shining or a rainfall worth like in Evil Dead 2013, but it was packing some viscous blood and in ants. If you're someone who does not want to see buckets of blood, well, it's too bad this movie brought tons of gore cannons shooting off left and right. The practical use of makeup for the proper bloody faces and vampires' teeth was also a major detail I appreciated. There were also contact lenses for the change from innocent girl Abigail to blood-sucking vampire Abigail. In addition, the costume department also deserves a shout-out for Abigail's ballerina outfit. Ensemble the practical set should also be applauded. I really liked the allure of the manor. The amount of mess this house went through, a boy. Surprisingly, there was some wire work involved, too. Abigail was quite the acrobat with her ballerina moves alongside her vampiric prowess. So it was really cool to see this combination. The studio noted that Weir learned all of the choreography for all of her ballet performances in the film. And I have to say that it was really impressive. The interpretive dancing and killing were almost poetic at times, while also being menacing. I know I always make some hard claims, but I would say Abigail is at the top of my list for best horror films this year. It was very cognizant of what it was, a silly premise story with tons of heart and thrilling moments, even though it was not as original a concept as last year's Talk to Me. I found this unique genre remix entertaining since it was done right for a film that is Almost 2 hours long, Abigail provided lots of laughs, screams, and gut-wrenching moments to make you wince a little. Lines, too, at the end of the night. This is a fun watch for horror fans who are very aware of the genre and crave something more. It zannily pushed bit and slashed expectations. The film was also dedicated to the late Angus Cloud, who played his part with a ton of hilarity, and he will dearly be missed, but remembered for these iconic moments. This film directed by Matt Belly-Alpin Tyler. Gillett, written by Stephen Shields, Guy Buck, produced by William Sherak James. Vanderbilt, Paul Neinstein Tripp, Vincent Chad, Valella. Starring Melissa Barra Dan. Stevens, Kathryn Newton, Catlett, Kevin Durant, Angus Cloud. Alicia Weir, J. Carlo Esposito, cinematography, Aaron Morton, edited by Michael Scher, music by Brian Tyler. Production companies, Project X Entertainment, Vincent Films Radio, Silence Productions, distributed by Universal Pictures, release dates April 7th. 2024 in Overlook Film Festival, April 19th, 324 in United States, running time 109. Minutes country United States language. English budget $128 million, box office $153 million. So guys, this is the review of Abigail movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it.